Hi, this week I'm focusing on the importance of believing in our pupils, in our children. So I've been doing lectures the last couple of weeks, and I've been talking about Vygotsky, who was writing 100 years ago and was talking about how if we perceive a disability, a learning need, special educational needs, it wasn't, those terms weren't used at the time, if we perceive those as a problem that is going to create loads and loads of difficulties and focus on the difficulties, then we actually end up creating a secondary area of need that can become the primary focus. So we can develop low self-esteem, we can develop a sense of I can't do it and therefore I'll misbehave. All those things can come out, and then they become the focus of our attention. We end up, instead of looking at the primary area of need, we end up looking at behaviour, and we end up looking at self-esteem, which they're important issues, but we almost forget what the actual cause is underlying that. So, for example, in the latest Code of Practice, the 2015 Code of Practice, it no longer talks about behaviour as an area of need. It talks about social, emotional, mental health as an area of need. So you have cognition and learning, you have speech language communication, you have physical and sensory needs, and you have social, emotional, mental health. There used to be behaviour instead of the mental health bit. And it's recognising that behaviour is often an indication of something else. So the idea is to now focus on the something else. And I've just been thinking about a few specific pupils. I've talked in the past about Rosie and her amazing abilities with art and writing. She's incredibly talented, and that's been fostered. So instead of focusing on, oh, you can't do this because of your autism, and therefore we just deal with the behaviour, the sort of biting and all the rest of it, and just sort of, oh, well, okay, you can't cope with it, let's make you happy type of thing. Instead of that, we gave her strategies for the frustration, where she could chew on her chew buddy. Remember, there was that silicone necklace where she could bite down on it. But we also found ways of accommodating the difficulties that her autism presented and enabling her to flourish in her strengths. You know, that amazing concentration that comes with her autism enabled her. She just does the most amazing artwork. Her writing is just beautiful to read. And we're able to build on the strengths. So we are looking at the autism, but not making it a problem in a way that means that other areas become a bigger issue. So that's one example. I was also thinking about a little boy. He's only a few years old, and he's got something called Prader-Willi syndrome. And that comes, this child, when he was born, his family were told basically to expect very little. They were told to expect him to have difficulties with mobility, difficulties, he's going to have this insatiable hunger, and therefore he's likely to become obese, and he's going to developmentally be very slow. Well, the family are a real gritty family, and they were like, well, that's not good enough. You know, we will have higher expectations. And they worked physically. You know, he had difficulties with his positioning of his limbs and his feet turning in, all sorts of things with his legs. And luckily his aunt is an osteopath, and she just worked daily on his limbs until, you know, he can walk, he can do things, reach those milestones. They were told he would have to be fed through a tube, and they limited the time he was fed through a tube. They got him sucking, they got that sucking reflex going. So they weren't prepared to put those limitations on. There is an understanding this is a real condition, and there will be measures needed to enable him to have the fullest possible life. But because they believe in him, because they are seeing the positives and working with it and not allowing it to be, oh, he won't be able to feed, oh, he won't develop well. Because instead of taking that attitude, they're like, well, let's see what he can do, and really working with him. He's developing amazingly. He is the most incredible little chap, and he is just adorable. But they are really bringing him on, and it's because they believe in him, because they didn't just give in to, oh, he won't. The I can't wasn't the option, if you like. If I talk about myself for a moment, I was slow to read, very, very slow to read. I wasn't reading properly until I was in junior school. Couldn't really read in the infants at all. And even then, I mean, even now it's a struggle. Reading is hard. I can decode words, but I can't get the real meaning, and they sometimes are in the wrong order, all sorts of things. I've talked about this before. Reading is difficult for me, but because my parents have always believed in me and supported me and told me I could do anything, achieve anything, I have. I got my doctorate this year, I mean, that was blooming hard work, but I got there. I was reminded of it by this beautiful episode from Educating Manchester, where this head teacher discloses to this child who's been misbehaving, playing up, and this child had low self-esteem because of his dyslexia, and this head teacher tells him that he has dyslexia and tells him the positives about it and how it's going to be hard work, I'm not pretending otherwise, but you know what, you've got this superpower, you think differently, you can do things differently, and you can achieve. And it built this boy up. You saw him grow and just sort of be like, wow. And he talked about his dyslexia in front of the class, and I found it very emotional, because it reminded me of me, both hopefully as a Senko. I tried to build people up, and also I knew where that child was coming from, those feelings of negativity. I also was thinking about a child I know with cerebral palsy, who I taught at my previous school, and he'd been led to have low self-esteem in terms of his academic achievements because he, as well as cerebral palsy, he had dyslexia. His handwriting was just, I couldn't read it. I really couldn't read what he was writing, and that's not just because I'm dyslexic. It was impossible to read. He'd been told off for that rather than supported and encouraged. We gave him said he could use a laptop, and the difference, it still, his writing, because of the dyslexia, would still be disjointed and words in the wrong order and sentences that just didn't make sense. But I could say to him, what are you trying to say? And I could do some of the typing for him, and then you'd start to get a flow, and we could work together and build on it, because this kid, he had it all up there. He had amazing ideas. He could articulate beautifully. Getting it on paper was another issue, and it's about believing in him and sort of encouraging him with his walking, but making accommodations to the school so that there were handrails and there were routes through that would require, be less strenuous for him and things like that. So finding the accommodations, but really finding the strengths as well, just building on those strengths and turning things, make it as positive as we could. I taught there was a boy I taught, not mentioning names. This is a boy who was very, very dyslexic. And his self-esteem was so low when I started working with him. He was in the infants, and the teacher just saw the behaviour. This is what I mean about the secondary need that Vygotsky talks about. The secondary behaviours were, he couldn't settle, he couldn't stay still. I mean, I'm thinking about myself. I'm fidgeting while I'm talking. I'm moving all the time. I find it hard to stay still. When I stay still, my thoughts don't work properly. In order for my thoughts to fully formulate and for me to be able to grab them and articulate, I need to in some way be moving. So whether that just be that my hands are fidgeting, or whether, if I'm on the phone, I'm just pacing, because it gets... Well, he was the same. He couldn't work sitting down. Sitting down, his ideas sort of got jumbled and clammed up. So he needed to move. And this child was so intelligent. This child had one of the highest scores in the various sort of verbal reasoning, if it were read to him, because he couldn't read, and non-verbal reasoning was just off the scale. He was performing sort of at double his age. He was a really, really bright child. Once he moved over to the junior school and I was seeing him more, I was able to, firstly, his teacher recognised that he needed to stand and move around, and that made a difference. His teacher didn't tell him off for that, but she just let the ideas flow, and that encouraged him. And gradually, by explaining that what he wrote mattered more than the spelling. The words he used were way more important than the spelling. And just get it all down and we'll help you and we'll do some of the writing and then you can write and we'll get it all together. That encouragement helped him to believe in himself, and he grew and grew and his self-confidence grew, and it was just a real flourishing thing. So the importance in all this is that we have to believe in our pupils. We also have to think, and I've said it before and I'll say it again, about how we praise children. If somebody says, oh yes, you're really good, you know, I mean, my parents are obviously going to tell me, oh, you're amazing, because they're my parents. They think I'm amazing, lovely. But it doesn't make me feel that I'm amazing. It's nice to hear, but it's not necessarily believed. But if they say, as my parents do, they'll say, no, that is amazing, pointing to something specific that I've done. If when we see our children and they produce a piece of work and it's all over the place with the spelling and everything else, but they have used rich vocabulary, we can turn around and say, your words, you are choosing amazing words, that's fantastic, let's build on that. That then boosts them. The spelling can come afterwards. We explain about proofreading, we build that resilience. But if we just say, oh, that's a good piece, they'll look at it, they'll see the untidy writing, they'll see the poor spelling, and they'll be like, no, it isn't. But if we target that bit, if we say, no, the words you are using are incredible, the imagery in that piece is phenomenal, we're being specific, and then they can't argue as much with the praise, they can accept it. Same with, say, maths, you know, they're getting the answers wrong. And they can be like, no, I'm useless at maths, I get it wrong. No, your working out is amazing. You know, you've actually got all the right processes, but you've just made a mistake with the adding up. That's okay. You just thought that 5 was a 2 or whatever it is, you know. We can work on that. We can work on your number bonds, or we can work on your tables, whatever it is. But you know what? You knew exactly what to do, and that's important. We've picked out that one bit that's gone right and praised them, and that then builds the self-esteem. So whatever it is, whether we're talking about a child with a physical disability, a sensory need, a cognitive need, a social, emotional, mental health need, if we address the actual need and find their strengths, where they're doing really well, we can build our children up. They can be the best they can be, but it's up to us as teachers, as educators, as parents, as support workers, to recognise the good, find the good. If somebody's been behaving in an unacceptable fashion in whatever reason, and then you see them, that small act of kindness that they've done, we point that out, we celebrate that good, we praise that good, and we are specific. If we do all these things, we can really help our children to be the best that they can be. Thank you.